Good evening, and this is News Front Agency with me, Catherine Nolan, and our weekly wrap Frontline. Let's take a look at week's most breaking events. Events in the usually peaceful European country of the Netherlands are getting a lot of attention these days. Riots in Rotterdam recently were sparked by a Dutch government's blocking of Turkish officials entering Holland to rally expert voters for an upcoming Turkish referendum. Officials here say they didn't in the name of security. Turkish President Erdogan blasted the action. He branded the Dutch Nazi remnants. He slapped them with diplomatic sanctions and threatened more. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, accompanying the Hague before Wednesday parliamentary vote, defended his action to Fox News. This depends on Turkey, he said. We didn't seek this fight. The Scottish government will move to hold a second referendum on independence from the United Kingdom, the country's First Minister has announced, blaming the UK's government lack of compromise over Brexit. Nicola Sturgeon made an announcement in a speech on Monday morning at Bute House, as MPs in Westminster prepared to give Theresa May the power to trigger Article 50 and begin Brexit negotiations. The First Minister said the vote had to be held between autumn 2018 and spring 2019, before it was too late but after the terms of Brexit are known. The First Minister says she will apply the UK to government to authorise the referendum, but that it should respect the will of the Scottish Parliament. Marine Le Pen is securing key votes as the French public turn away from scandal-hit former Prime Minister François Fillon. And things are only set to get worse as Fillon gets set to meet judges investigating claims he gave thousands of euros of taxpayers' money to his wife in a fake job scandal. The Republicans' leader became embroiled in yet another scandal yesterday when he was accused of accepting £43,000 in free clothes. Fillon is losing votes to Marine Le Pen, who has once again taken a lead against En Marche candidate Emmanuel Macron, who is tipped by pollsters to win the second vote. A new opinion poll showed Fillon crashing out of race in the first round, taking 20% of the votes to Macron's 25% and Le Pen's 27%. The United States may deploy an additional 1,000 troops into northern Syria in a matter of weeks to aid the offensive against the Daesh terrorist group. The Washington Post reported on Wednesday, citing U.S. defense officials, that 1,000 more troops would be sent into Syria to back the offensive against Daesh in the city of Raqqa. On March the 9th, the U.S.-led coalition against Daesh confirmed that the U.S. Marine Corps artillery unit had deployed to Syria to aid local forces in the Raqqa offensive. The plan sent additional U.S. troops is pending approval from Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, the report added. The plan comes on the heels of Mattis' briefing on February 27th with the National Security Council's Principals Committee on a plan to defeat Daesh. Once the WikiLeaks released thousands of documents that uncover an extensive amount of hacking tools used by the CIA, including a wide range of programs and backdoors that allow to wiretapping of smartphones, personal computers and even smart TVs, the whole world has once again had the chance to learn that it is not the mysterious Russian hackers that pose a real threat to the intelligence security, but the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States. The tale about Russian hackers, which was extensively used by the CIA and closely affiliated agencies in their propaganda war, was necessary to whitewash American intelligence agencies, which were established total surveillance over their own politicians and those governing foreign states. The documents released by WikiLeaks showed that the CIA, together with its counterparts from the British Special Services, has even found a way of hacking Samsung smart TVs by adapting some of the tools they had to monitor the owners of such TV sets. Within the framework of the project codenamed Weeping Angel, the CIA they learned to secretly turn the built-in microphone. Moreover, the exploit allowed Western intelligence services to make it when the TV seems turned off, whereas in fact it was operating, recording that all the conversations from them to be transmitted to the CIA server. In a recent show, The Late Show, former CIA Director Michael Hayden confirmed the existence of such a tool in the CIA arsenal and even called it wonderful. According to him, bad people also use Samsung TVs. He also said that the CIA didn't plan to use his surveillance strategy against fellow Americans. As for the people from other countries, he didn't specify anything, thus making it clear that there are variety of opportunities. In order to stop this outburst of espionage activities of the USA in the world, international players are to start asking questions, applying pressure on Washington through the UN framework and through the international organizations for its numerous violations of the most basic human rights. And the international community must impose severe sanctions on the US through court decisions for the blatant case of espionage. Recently, Nicola Sturgeon announced in the second referendum, in the second independence referendum, Theresa May rejected this demand, saying that it's not the time for it and the vote can be held after Brexit. So what can you tell about it?
Well, first of all, the divisions within Britain over Brexit are becoming all the more serious, and we can say now that there is a serious and tense standoff between the Westminster government and the Scottish government, and the potential for a full-blown confrontation between the Scottish government and Theresa May is a distinct possibility. So Theresa May had hoped that in the week when the Brexit bill would receive royal assent and would become law, that the spotlight would be on her and that she would be able to say, now that Brexit is law, I'm on schedule to invoke Article 50, and trade discussions will be commencing between Britain and the European Union and between Britain and other countries in the world. So Theresa May had hoped the spotlight would be on that. However, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, who is a very clever, a very shrewd politician, stole the limelight from Theresa May by announcing that she would go before the Scottish Parliament and ask for permission to hold a second referendum on Scottish independence. Now, of course, things have changed dramatically in that Theresa May's response is that there is not going to be a second independence referendum for Scotland before Brexit, i.e. before Britain is officially withdrawn from the European Union. And indeed, I've heard some politicians at Parliament, I've spoken with other journalists at Parliament who have said that Theresa May and other members within the Conservative government could try and delay a second independence referendum for Scotland by up to 6 years, because their argument is that in 6 years' time there will be new parliamentary elections to the Scottish Parliament, and that as Nicola Sturgeon would have to receive a mandate from the Scottish people to hold a referendum, because of course in 2021 the SNP would go into those parliamentary elections in theory saying that we want you to re-elect us, because one of the things we're going to do is to hold a second independence referendum. So there's a possibility now that an independence referendum in Scotland could be delayed until 2021 if Theresa May and her Conservative government get what they want.
But yes, but I heard that she announced that in winter of 2018 or in spring 2019. So you don't agree with that?
Well, that's Nicola Sturgeon is demanding that. Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, is saying that there will be an independence referendum either in the late 2018 or early 2019. But the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, has ruled that out. She's saying no. That would be unfair to the Scottish people because they wouldn't be able to see what sort of Brexit deal has been achieved. So Theresa May is saying that the referendum in Scotland can only take place after Britain has left the European Union. And of course, once Theresa May invokes Article 50, which according to her own timetable is going to be at the end of March, then Britain has 2 years to leave the European Union.
What about Queen? Maybe you heard something, because well, recently I read that Queen approved something, but I'm not sure about that. Well,
of course, in Britain we have a what's called a constitutional monarchy, whereby the Queen, or if it's a king, is the head of state. But the country is run by the Prime Minister and by his or her government. Now, in reality, the Queen has immense powers, and I think any argument to say that the Queen does not have a say in the run-in of Britain, I think is untenable. I think that given the real power in Britain, the real power lies with the British establishment, which of course is the royal family, the aristocracy, the top brass of the British military, the senior leadership of the intelligence communities, MI5, MI6, GCHQ. They are the ones who hold the power, and at the heart of the British establishment is of course the Queen. So if we go back a few years to 2014, when there was the first independence referendum in Scotland, some reports surfaced which said that the Queen did not want Scotland to leave the European Union. Let's not forget the British establishment, the royal family, and the aristocracy own a lot of land in Scotland. And then after the Scots voted by a narrow majority for Scotland to remain in the United Kingdom, it is believed that the then British Prime Minister David Cameron called up the Queen and said something along the lines of, I'm sure Your Majesty can feel more relaxed now. Now, I'm paraphrasing it because I can't remember the exact wording of what David Cameron allegedly said. But the point is this, is that I do not believe the Queen and the royal family in general want Scotland to leave the United Kingdom, because it would mean that the country which the Queen is the head of would reduce in size, and they would lose a lot of their estates, a lot of their properties in Scotland. So I think it's fairly obvious that the Queen would prefer for Scotland to remain a part of the United Kingdom.
And my last question is about economy. Well, the Scottish referendum, if it will be, if the Scotland would be depart from the United Kingdom, it would cause some really extremely, well, that will cause problems for economy. But some experts say that yes, the Scotland can live on their own, so everything would be fine. But another say that no, that won't work. So what do you think?
I think it's once again generally agreed upon that in the immediate aftermath of Brexit, 80,000 people in Scotland could lose their jobs. And that is just in the immediate aftermath of Brexit. What will happen a year after, 2 years after, 3 years after? The Scottish economy, without a doubt, could function and could prosper in a world where there is an independent Scotland. I believe that the UK economy needs the Scottish economy more than what the Scottish economy needs the UK economy. In Scotland, there is a very large manufacturing sector. There is a very large agricultural sector. There's a very large IT sector. And of course, Scotland has oil and gas in the North Sea. And some years ago, oil and gas was found off the west coast of Scotland. So much so that Norway is very, very interested in starting to drill for that oil and gas, which is a real winner for the Scottish economy. However, if Scotland remained a part of the United Kingdom, then Scotland, the Scottish people, and the Scottish economy, I believe, really would suffer, because many jobs would be lost in Scotland. And it's also important to say this, that for decades now, Westminster, in particular when there has been a Conservative government at Westminster, has deliberately neglected Scotland. And as a result of that, poverty is rife in areas across Scotland. Social injustice is rife You take a city like Glasgow. Glasgow has some of the poorest areas in the whole of the European Union. Now, why have successive Conservative governments starved Scotland of cash, of money? Simply because Scotland is overwhelmingly, vehemently anti-conservative. Historically, they voted Labour. Now they've started voting for the Scottish National Party, and the Scottish National Party is a left-wing stroke centre-left party. So the Conservatives starve Scotland because they want to because they don't want to distribute wealth in Scotland where people don't like the Conservative Party. They want to keep it in the south of England, which ultimately is the heart of the United Kingdom. It's the rich part of the United Kingdom, and it's overwhelmingly Conservative voting. So Conservative governments know that they can save money by not distributing money in Scotland, and they're not going to lose any votes in Scotland because people in Scotland don't like the Conservative Party. And we can also say the same about how successive Conservative governments have starved cities in northern England, for example, Liverpool and Manchester, because people there are overwhelmingly Labour and they bitterly dislike the Conservatives. So I think going back to Scotland, I think that in a world where there's an independent Scotland, Scotland will do very well. It has a lot going for it. And I might also add as well that Scottish politicians and Scottish journalists and Scottish ordinary people I speak to are far more open-minded when it comes to Russia, for example, the Crimea, than their English counterparts. The heart of British hostility towards Russia is really the English. It's not the Scottish. And the Scottish are very progressive and they have an internationalist outlook. And Scotland and the Scottish people do not want to be dragged into Britain's military crusades around the world in tandem with the Americans. So I think that economically, Scotland and independent Scotland would prosper. And secondly, Scottish foreign policy would be far more healthy for the United Nations, for international law, than British foreign policy. And I think the possibility for Russia and an independent Scotland to establish good, close bilateral relations and good economic and trade relations is a very, very real possibility.
I see. Thank you for your commentary. Thank you for taking time. As usual, we will follow events and see what will happen next. So yes. That's it for today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or read us in social networks and stay tuned. Goodbye and see you next week.